I don't have any big introduction because you all are very familiar with Noah's work. I will just say that he is the second most delightful podcaster in atheism because I don't know if you all know the delightful podcast Habeas Humor. We have Sharon with us here today, so please check hers out, and maybe we can get her to give a presentation here sometime. So please check her out. But other than that, please welcome Noah Lugeons to talk about how to survive a theocracy in 8 easy steps.
All right, thank you so much for coming out. I don't know how many of you guys had to deal with stuff like I had to deal with on the way out. We were keeping count. We ended up with, I think, 6 down trees, 2 down power lines, 3 towns with no power and therefore no traffic lights. Spent the night in a Tauntaun. It was really rough. Shackletonian, one might say. I really appreciate y'all coming out, though. I thought, with the weather, it would be a much smaller crowd. The good Lord was trying to stop this from happening, but he couldn't make it. So I really appreciate Lehigh Valley Humanists for asking me out. I've never done a talk like this before. I've talked before. It's what I do for a living, but I've never given a talk like this. Normally, I'm used to being able to back up and edit out all the stuff I screw up and stuff like that. And I'm also used to my bits being like 6-7 minutes long, not nearly an hour. I asked my wife. She said, "Why don't you just do a diatribe at normal human talking pace?" Yeah, that just might work. But like I said, I was really nervous about this because I don't know how this is. Because okay, so first question, right? Do you use visual aids or not? Because the research will tell you not to. If you look at the studies, they actually say people get less out of your talk if you do visual aids. They listen to you less, they retain less, etc. That being said, if you don't use visual aids, people just assume you didn't do your homework and you're just citing that research as an excuse and everything. So I went with visual aids. I brought. Is this? What is the? How does this? Do you just hit the little? Do you hit this thing or what's the? Anyway, I brought a chart. It's going to show up eventually. Oh, do I have to space bar it? Oh, all right. There's my chart. Excellent. I also brought a graph. They said you should have graphs and charts. I don't know what the hell this is, but I brought this too. I feel really smart when I stand next to it, though, right? And I'm wearing a sports coat too, so I look really smart right now, I think. But that's important to me because I looked at some of the past speakers you guys have had, and they're people who know stuff about things, and I don't. I'm technically an author because I'm self-published, and they can't stop you from being an author now. But I don't actually know things. But I do have one field of expertise. I have several fields of expertise. One of them, my wife warns everybody about at the beginning of the show every week. Do you want to warn everybody that I'm going to cuss a lot? Yeah, I'm going to. I apologize. I know some of you aren't familiar with my work. I cuss a lot. If you find the F word shocking, I am going to shock the fuck out of you. I apologize.
Phil Ferguson took care of that.
Okay, all right. Awesome. Go, Phil. But like I said, I don't have a lot of expertise other than the cussing. I thought about doing a talk about that, about proper use of fuck. It's not ab-fucking-salutely. It's abso-fucking-lutely. It matters where you infix, but I didn't think many people would come out for that talk. So I decided I have another field of expertise. About 5 years ago, I started a podcast called The Scathing Atheist, open parenthesis, wait for applause to die down, close parenthesis. See, I would have nailed that if I got to edit it. Oh, there we go. And when I started this podcast, there were actually, there were quite a few atheist podcasts already in existence. Now, by the standard of 5 years ago, quite a few was like 11. There's like 600 now. But most of the podcasts that existed at that time were outreach podcasts, right? They were podcasts for Christians from atheists, generally. They were shows like American Atheist, where you could call in and get atheist perspective. They were shows that were just like, hey, guys, we don't eat babies. We're not dangerous. And that's important, right? I'm glad that those shows existed, but I didn't want to do those shows. I wanted to do something else. So instead of talking about the serious issues of the day, on our show, we make fun of this guy. By the way, I found that exact picture by Googling Ooga Booga. That is not a joke. I mean, it is a joke. It's true, but it's a joke. But yeah, we make fun of that guy. We make fun of this guy here. This dude. This asshole right here. This guy. And people would always say to me, what's the point? Why do you make fun of these? 20% of these guys don't even exist. The other 80%, they have no power. They wield no power. So why do you make fun of them? And mostly it's because it's easy. But I've got to be honest, people used to ask me that all the time. They don't ask me that so much anymore. Because now those people have power. Now, I will say, as a watchdog of the crazy evangelical community, I've seen this coming. And I felt like a bit of a Cassandra warning people, we are taking significant steps towards a theocracy. Right? And people would say, no, it's Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson is a nut job. He's an outlier. If you really want to deal with religion, you got to deal with my grandma, right? My grandma, she's Christian, and all she does is bake cookies for the blood drive or whatever. She's a perfectly good person. If you want to talk about Christianity, you can't talk about Pat Robertson. You're straw manning at that point. Well, what makes Pat Robertson a straw man? Let's take a look. What makes Pat Robertson terrifying, okay? He believes homosexuality is a sin, right? Would it surprise you to believe that 71% of evangelical Christians agree with him? It's not lined up. I don't know why. All right, so anyway, that's number one, right? Now, this is, by the way, I'm using evangelical Christians here. If you just poll Christians, actually the majority of Christians do believe that the society should be more accepting of LGBTQ people, but when we're talking just evangelicals, right? When we're talking about the Pat Robertsons of the world, 71% of them agree with him. What else about P. Robes? He doesn't believe in evolution. Surprise, surprise, 64% of evangelicals in America agree with him. He opposes trans rights. I bet you're expecting a big number. I've got one for you. 84% agree with him on that. Right? Those are all, by the way, those are all the latest Pew survey numbers. The rest of these are from YouGov. He believes the devil is a literal guy that walks around and has coffee or something, and 70% of evangelical Christians in this country agree with him. This was terrifying to me. He believes in demonic possession. He believes that if you buy a sweater at a secondhand store, you have to have it exorcised for demons before you wear it, because who knows what kind of demons the last person left in it. And he's joined by 59% of evangelicals in that belief. What else is terrifying about him? He is a sentient version of the pitch drop experiment. He is in the minority there, only 13%. It's a higher number than I expected. But the point is, these guys are in power. Now, what are they going to do with the power? We're already seeing it. The ultimate goal is a theocracy. That is not hyperbole there. That's what they're after. And before we move any further, I want to introduce you to somebody very important in my talk. This is Loki. Right? He has a calming effect on me. And I'm going to be talking about some pretty heavy shit here, so. Stay. So yeah, he's going to show up once in a while to calm me back down as I give this talk, How to Survive a Theocracy in 8 Easy Steps. Now, obviously, we want to avoid a theocracy. We all want to listen to Jim, and we want to get out from under this before it happens. But at this point, I feel like we should have a contingency plan. We should be seriously talking about what are we going to do if we fail? What are we going to do if we wind up living in a theocracy? Let's face it, most of us didn't expect, 3-4 years ago to be waking up in today, right? So it's not impossible. So, 8 easy steps that I'm going to offer you. Step 1. You tell me what's the appropriate picture here, right? I mean, I went through 3 or 4, and my wife said, no. Most people don't even know who Sharon Stone is anymore. Move on. But step 1 is don't have a vagina. I can see a lot of you already taking my advice out there. It makes me feel good, like I'm connecting with you as a speaker. This is tricky, by the way, because if you start off having a vagina and then later you don't, they're even more pissed. So you have to really be thinking ahead on this one. Because look, when the theocracy hits, the largest group of people that are going to suffer because of it are obviously the women. And we know that because as soon as they got a taste of theocratic power, their first victim, right, the first target was Planned Parenthood. love that headline so much. That's from The Onion, obviously. And the reason that I'm aware of it, there was this website called literallyunbelievable.com where they would like do just screen caps of people on social media who found Onion headlines and thought they were real. And every time I looked at it, this would be up on like 500 different things. You know, people, a bunch of red staters going, "You see there?" That's what they think they're fighting against, and that explains why they're fighting so hard, I guess. But I hate to say this, but I feel like they're winning that fight. Right? And I'm not the only one. Apparently, Mike Pence agrees with me. Mike Pence told his supporters on Tuesday that he expects to see an end to legal abortion in his lifetime. Mike Pence is no spring chicken, by the way. And notice how he said it, by the way. Notice the phrasing there. He said an end to legal abortion. Right? Because he knows abortion is still going to be around. And that's the big problem with abortion, by the way, is how safe it is. So that's why they start lying to you. You know, they say, abortion's not safe. Well, compared to a medical procedure, really? They say abortion causes breast cancer. No, it doesn't. They say it causes future miscarriages. No, it doesn't. They say it causes depression. No, it doesn't. So when people wouldn't believe their nonsense, right? When people wouldn't buy their bullshit anymore, they said about making it unsafe. They want to make a negative consequence out of it. So I'm going to tell you the story real quick. I'm going to get kind of serious here. Tell you the story of Tamisha Means. Oh, wait, I have to back that up. I have to intro that right. See, the problem is a lot of you think maybe they can't do it legislatively, and maybe you're right, but they don't have to do it legislatively because they will buy the hospitals if they can't change the laws. Right? And now I'm going to tell you the story of Tamisha Means. Some of you might already know this story. Tamisha Means, she's a fellow Michigander like myself, lived north of Detroit, so even in the even more desolate part of Michigan. She was pregnant. She was 18 weeks pregnant, and her water broke. So obviously she went to the hospital. She went to the only hospital in her community, in her county, called Mercy Health Partners, I believe it was. And it was a Catholic hospital. She says, "I'm 18 weeks pregnant. My water broke. Is there anything you can do to help me?" They said, "No, go home." That's not a direct quote, but that's what they told her. They told her to go home. They said there's nothing they can do with her. Let's be super clear. There is something they could have done for her, right? The 18-week-old fetus, there's no viability here. They could have given her an abortion. But no, their policies are not set based on medical needs. Their policies are not set by doctors. They're set by 50-year-old guys in white chokers who've never had sex and think they're part angel. Right? That's who's setting this. So they send her home. She comes back the next day, bleeding and in pain. And they say, "Hey," she says, "Hey, can you give me an abortion?" She specifically asked for that. They said, "No, we're a Catholic hospital. Go home." She comes back later that same day, now with a serious infection. They finally administer medical treatment to her. They give her an aspirin. That's serious. That's what happened. And they sent her home again. Fourth time she goes to the hospital. Now she's in labor. Now they are willing to help. So they pull this 18-week-old doomed fetus out of her. It lives for an hour and a half, and they send her on. Now the ACLU found out about this. They sued the hospital, but the courts disagreed. The courts ruled in favor of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops because the courts believed that the beliefs of the hospital, right, the beliefs of a building were more important than this woman's health. According to the ACLU, this is not a small problem. 1 in 6 U.S. hospital beds are in Catholic facilities that prohibit essential health care for women. And the problem is growing. And now you see why I need Loki. He's yawning. He's very tired. All right. So obviously I could go on with that for a very long time, but we've got 7 more steps to get to. Now, step 2 is made a little bit more complicated by our venue today. Step 2, don't be gay. Don't kill the messenger here. I'm just warning you. Because women will be the largest group that suffers, but public enemy number 1, right, in the theocracy. You're not going to want to be an L or a G or a B or a T or a Q. If there's a letter for it, you're not going to want to be it. To look back here, because when Christians wake up in the middle of the night, terrified and covered in sweat, this is the image, right, that's echoing through their nightmare. Right here. And we knew how bad it was going to get as soon as this guy got in the picture. Take your pick which guy I'm talking about, by the way. But yeah, no, this is my buddy Mike Pence. Mike Pence, you could tell immediately, right, when Trump announced him as his running mate, you could see where this was going, right? Now, Mike Pence, of course, is a notoriously anti-gay golem or something. But then that's obviously was back in the news quite a bit during the Olympics, right? There was the Olympic skater that was openly gay, and they said, "Are you going to meet with Mike Pence?" And he went, "No." And then there was this big push, right? This big push from Mike Pence's PR guys to try to pretend that, no, he's not anti-LGBT. That's just a rumor. Because let's face it, that guy's going to be president any minute now. So they want to comb over. It's like, honestly, how surprised would you be if at the end of the talk you look at your phone and you're like, Mike Pence is president. So they're trying to clear up his image. As a matter of fact, the people from The Federalist ran this headline the other day. I love this. Despite the hysteria, there's no proof Mike Pence is anti-LGBT. A lot of evidence, but there's no proof. All right, so let's make up our minds ourselves here. This is Mike Pence. Mike Pence, he's the vice president of the United States. Hurts me as much to say it as it hurts you to hear it. This is a quote from Vice President Pence here. Congress should oppose any effort to recognize homosexuals as a discrete and insular minority entitled to the protection of anti-discrimination laws similar to those extended to women and ethnic minorities. Right? This is where they've drawn the line in the sand on human rights. Who the fuck has a line in the sand on human rights? This guy does. Wait, there's more. Homosexuality is incompatible with military service because the presence of homosexuals in the ranks weakens unit cohesion. Only if you're a bigot, Mike. The problem here is you. Wait, there's more. He opposed the 2009 Matthew Shepard Hate Crime Act because he said pastors, quote, could be charged or be subjected to intimidation for simply expressing a biblical worldview on the issue of homosexual behavior. Wait, there's more. As Indiana's governor, as you'll recall, this is why we all knew the guy in the first place. He set the state economy on fire in an effort to make it impossible for gay people to buy cheese. And of course, despite his vehement protestations during the Olympics, he supported using federal tax dollars to fund gay conversion therapy. If you're not familiar with it, that's a euphemism for torturing children. And he has pushed back hard, by the way, on this one in particular, right? This is the one that the skater was getting onto him about. If there is a possible way to support using federal tax dollars to fund gay conversion therapy badly, he found it, right? So let me tell you the story on this one. If you don't know, this is back in, I believe it was in 1990. He was congressman at the time. Congress has got a bill up to provide funds for people who had HIV and didn't have the means to pay for treatment. Mike Pence put out a statement saying that he thought that they should oppose giving any of those funds to any group unless they also had gay conversion therapy as one of the things that they offered. He said, I should have brought the quote, I don't have the exact quote, but he said something along the lines of, we shouldn't be giving these dollars to the groups that would promote the type of behavior that leads to HIV/AIDS in the first place. Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, so that. And now he's trying to come back and back that up and say, no. When he said, changing the behaviors that lead to HIV, he wasn't talking about gay people. He was talking about using condoms. Wait, well, so he wanted a rider on there to make sure that the HIV/AIDS money wasn't going to places that were anti-condom? What? Yeah, but that's Mike Pence. I want to talk a little bit more about conversion therapy. Like I said, it's children torturing. And every reputable psychological association, everyone who's in a position to know, and every ethical human being agrees on that. And yet, that's the states where it's banned right there. That's all 9 of them. The other 41, there's some cities and municipalities and a few other states that offer up protections, but that's it. Right now, a couple of years ago, it seemed like we were really about to turn a corner on this. A couple of years ago, there were a number of states that were proposing bans. There was a lot of talk of a federal ban. That all disappeared, though, in 2016. All of a sudden, boom, they started falling, boom. And instead, we got states trying to, set up laws to make it so you can't sue someone for it later, right? They're trying to protect conversion therapy. It's in a corner. All right. So right now you're thinking to yourself, all right, well, no, come on, these You said these are 8 easy steps. They're easy for you because you're a heterosexual, cisgendered penis haver over here. But we're going to get back to all of the different ways that our LGBTQ friends are going to suffer in the theocracy. We're going to circle back to that later. But I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that everybody's got to give up something. So step 3 here, don't be an atheist. See, I told you, it's on my list. It's on my list. Now, it matters what kind of not atheist you are. So, I would recommend this one over here on your left. If it's this theocracy anyway. You keep this one in mind depending on where you are, you know. Not this. It's not going to help you at all. But honestly, though, this one, though, is the easy one, right? This one right here is the easy one. They say it's hard, but it's not. You're allowed to cheat on your wife. You're allowed to cheat on your taxes. You're allowed to get divorced. You're allowed to steal money from the poor or just be an otherwise horrible person. As long as you quote 2 Corinthians now and again, they'll forgive you. Even vote for you. I had to get through that one pretty quick because I got to move on to this other one. This one's less intuitive than the first 3. Step 4, don't earn money. Like I said, not as intuitive. I'll have to kind of talk you through this one. The problem here is if you earn money in the theocracy, they're going to take some of that money in taxes and they're going to give it to churches to support religious outreach. Right? We're already seeing that. That's thanks to this guy right here. This is Neil Gorsuch. Contrary to popular opinion, he did not steal a Supreme Court seat. Mitch McConnell stole one and gave it to him. And now he has it. And thanks to him, we live in a world with the Trinity Lutheran decision. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. I'm sure most of you guys know Trinity Lutheran. They had, there's this thing called the First Amendment. Or there used to be this thing called the First Amendment. Had a separation of power, separation of church and state sort of in it. And it was so popular that some states went out and they made their own laws, you know, like just kind of reinforcing it, saying, hey, you know, we're doing the First Amendment over here too. Missouri was one of those states. So Missouri had a law that said if we're going to be giving money to just general institutions, they can't be religious institutions because, you know, the First Amendment. So they had this program where they had the money to recover a bunch of playgrounds with the mulched up tire stuff. You remember the stuff that, like, we decided to start putting on playgrounds because we had concrete under our monkey bars, and we decided that's a pretty bad idea. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. You know, actually, that explains a lot of my talk now that you think about it. But now they're going to put the mulched up tire stuff on there. And they're like, of course, if you're a church, you need not apply. And so Trinity Lutheran said, hey, how come? And they're like, have you ever heard of the First Amendment? And they're like, thou shalt put no gods before me? And they're like, no, that's a different one. And so they said, no, we're going to sue you. And the courts agreed with Trinity Lutheran. They agreed that this was not a religious institution. Could have fooled me. But it's not this, it's this part over here, right? This is where the playground is, you see, and that's different. I can't blame Neil Gorsuch entirely. This was a 6-3 decision somehow. Because Breyer decided he was going to put a little fig leaf on it, and he was going to say, no. It's not the church that's getting the money. It's the playground where they pluck children for the church. Right? Like that was somehow different. But of course, that fig leaf fell away right away. As I'm sure you saw, FEMA's giving your money to churches now. They recently declared that churches not only are eligible for disaster relief, but retroactively. And you can even go back, all of those disasters last year. Yeah, no, and there's no restriction here on playgrounds or non-secular portions of the church. They're rebuilding pews and shit. They're buying more Bibles with this money. And of course, they cited Trinity Lutheran in their statement. Even though Trinity Lutheran it doesn't matter what Trinity Lutheran said. It matters what they think they can get away with. And apparently, they can get away with that. So you're not going to want to earn money. You're thinking to yourself, well, if I can't earn money, how am I going to buy stuff? It's a real sign that you can buy, by the way. I don't know why nobody told them. They're like, wait, you're like, okay, how am I going to buy stuff? Well, don't worry, you won't be able to buy anything anyway. There's a good reason for that. There is a limit to how much bigotry they think they can get away with, right? There is a limit to how much bigotry they can get away with. So they can't just put out a sign like that. That's not going to fly. Right? So instead, they have to find, and by the way, I did not write this sign and then take a picture of it or anything. I found this, I Googled this. Instead of this, they have to put up a sign like this. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who would violate our right of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. What does that mean? It means this. It's got more words in it, though, and it's got legal stuff, and it's about our rights, not your rights. Now I'm fighting for my rights to deny you your rights, and that's okay, apparently. See, here's the idea. Here's the bullseye. That's right in the center of the bullseye. But again, they recognize that they can't just be as nakedly bigoted as it requires to go right at the bullseye there, so they have to make this whole it's about religious freedom thing, which means that, boom, we're real close to that target, and they don't give two shits if we wind up taking a few bullets now and again, right? Literally and figuratively, but we're not talking about the other one. So yeah, what about unwed couples? Well, if it's about my religious belief, I'm a landlord, you're living in sin. I don't want to rent a room to you. Single mother, same thing. That slut, she was never married. That's against my religion too. Interracial couples, you're right the hell out. It actually says something about that in the Bible. Pretty soon, boom, everybody's getting hit. Now, I don't know what the term is for one who does, like, it's like, butlers don't buttle, but we have a word for it. I don't know. But seriously, all of these, you can make a pretty reasonable argument from some different Christian interpretation, some popular Christian interpretation in America, that every one of those guys should be denied service. And they're willing to go that far with it. All right, so that's step 4, don't earn money. We're going to use cowrie shells or the giant stone money of Palau. We'll figure something out. I didn't trust in God anyway. Step 5, also a counterintuitive one. Step 5, learn karate. Now, a lot of people believe that in order to learn karate, you have to team up with another group of people, and each of you has to pick a color. That's not true. That's just from TV. But you're going to want to learn karate. Again, not super intuitive. I'll walk you through this one. You know how every once in a while, Donald Trump will wake up one morning, and he's all pissed off, and so he'll say, Jews can't do the hokey pokey anymore. And then this lady will come through and say, and of course, and our reaction is to go, whew, the judicial branch. That was a good idea. Glad we have those guys. Glad we have those guys smacking down all these stupid laws. Glad we invested power in those guys. What we should be saying, though, this comes with a warning. Glad we invested power in those guys. It's a good thing they're not all insane. Well, quick saying that while you still can. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard about some of the wacky appointees he's had. It's not a bipartisan talk, by the way. I should have warned you in advance. He's had several of his nominees, at least a couple of his nominees, rejected by the American Bar Association as unanimously unqualified. That's pretty unprecedented. The reason is because other presidents would check with the ABA before they submitted the names. But no, he's just taking names from crazy evangelical groups going, who do I have to make a judge for you to vote for me? Right? So let's meet a few of his finest. This is Jeff Mateer. I didn't go out of my way looking for a creepy pedophile-looking picture of him or anything. That's the one he puts out there. That's his profile. Jeff Mateer once said, and he probably had this look on his face when he said it, he once said that transgendered children are part of Satan's plan. Now, I honestly, you know what? You could cover up this part, and I'd still be terrified, right? Anybody who thinks Satan's plan is a thing, I don't want him judging me. This is Mark Norris. He was a district court nominee. I believe this guy's been confirmed. I couldn't figure out for sure. He suggested that Muslim is a synonym for terrorist. Should make him a great judge. He also led efforts to prohibit the removal of Confederate statues. He's such a big fan of states' rights. This is John Bush. You want to buy insurance off the guy, right? Now, he was confirmed. He was confirmed. He's a federal district court judge. John Bush, he compared Roe versus Wade to Dred Scott. Honestly, regardless of which way he was going with comparison, that's pretty offensive. But no, we know which way he was going because when asked what the two greatest tragedies in American history were, his answers were slavery and abortion. 1 out of 2 ain't bad. Also, he belongs to a social club that excludes African Americans and Jews. I want to emphasize that this is now, right? We live in now. And where the hell do you even find... Okay, but wait, I saved the best for last. Look at this creepy-looking guy. This is Leonard Stephen Grass. Grass? I don't know. I had to use a smaller font for this guy, so bear with me. He was nominated to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, served on the board of an organization that supports closing clinics that provide reproductive care, not just the reproductive care part, the whole clinic, condemns SCOTUS decisions that protect women's rights. He's just kind of blanket against that concept. Says abortion puts women's lives at risk. He's not a super big fan of facts either. He supports conversion therapy, remembering the torturing of the children? Yeah, that's him. He's all about that. Wants to let employers discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, right? We were getting way too close to equality. He wants to pump the brakes on that. Calls marriage equality a threat. To what? He doesn't specify, but he says it's a threat. And, of course, condemns the teaching of evolution in public schools. So why does this mean you need to learn karate? Do you want this guy deciding disputes for you? Do you want to walk up to a guy like this or somebody equally qualified and try to get him to figure out where your property line is? No. You're going to need ninjutsu. It's your only choice. Now, this is a super confusing one. This is the next step. This is step 6. Step 6 is don't know things. I know. How are you supposed to know not to know things? I just told you you had to know karate, and now I'm telling you not to know things. The point here, though, is that lies are frustrating when you know the truth, right? And they're going to need a lot of lies to prop up the theocracy. But if you don't know the truth, shouldn't be a problem, right? Be nice and easy. Now, I have some advice on that because it's hard to unknow stuff. I have some advice. I figured you guys might want some directions here. So self-inflicted head trauma. I hear that works really well. Memory impairing drugs. I'm a fan, by the way. If you want some of my favorites, see me after the show. And I couldn't do a list of 2 things, so I had to come up with a third one, right? And I thought, okay, how else? And then I came up with this. I think this is a good idea, actually. Alex Jones marathons. Right? This would be like the gallon in a thimble method, right? All the stuff that you pour. Alex Jones. Let's see, he has anti-knowledge. It's like anti-matter to the matter, and you zero it out. But yeah, it's going to be super important not to know things in the theocracy. The more things you know, the more frustrated you're going to be. And you're thinking to yourself, but I don't want to be the only one who doesn't know things. I'll be embarrassed. Don't worry, it'll be popular in the theocracy. It'll be something of a trend, something of a fashion, which leads me to step 7. That is learn to do your own surgery. Because you are not going to want to count on graduates of theocratic American schools to take a needle to your arm. Right? You'd rather have Sly Stallone doing it, trust me. Which brings us to this lady. Yeah, right. No, hold on. See, he's got his little, he's sitting like a person. He's like a person. He's got his little remote like he's going to change the channel. He's not going to change the channel. He's a cat. All right, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to talk about the Secretary of Education. How are we doing on time? Am I like way over on time? Am I good? Okay, all right, good, cool. All right, so Betsy DeVos, by the way, this I find fascinating. Betsy DeVos is the least popular member of Trump's cabinet. This is fattest guy in Wisconsin kind of stuff, right? To begin with. She is the least, but she's the Secretary of Education, not normally a super controversial position. But I don't know, I haven't checked. Ben Carson's making a late break for it. Maybe he's pulled ahead of her now. $31,000 for a damn table, man. Anyway, all right, so I had to use a super small font for Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos, of course, vice president of an organization that funds Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council. If you're not familiar with those 2 groups, they're hate groups, right? Certified TM hate groups. So much so that when she was being confirmed to her position, she tried to deny that. She tried to pretend that she was not the VP of that organization. I believe it's called the DeVos Organization. They said, you realize they filed taxes, your name is right here, right? No, I have nothing to do with that. It's her family's institution. She has her own organization as well, the Dick and Betsy DeVos Foundation. They donated $15 million to Christian institutions. That is not in itself bad, right? Like there's a way that you could do that, and maybe there's better ways to spend your money. That's not in itself bad until you start looking at which Christian institutions she was donating the money to. Largely, they were Christian schools that exclude LGBT teachers, schools that exclude LGBT students and don't teach you about evolution, et cetera, et cetera. It was that kind of stuff. That and Christian think tanks designed to find ways to get more federal dollars into Christian schools. And that's not just my opinion, by the way, as much. She's called for the privatization of American education. Now, keep in mind, she donated $50 million to Christian institutions. What kind of private education do you think she has in mind? Right? Also, she thinks bears roam the halls of American schools. Now, I'm not just making fun of her for this. It matters when your Secretary of Education is stupid. Right? It's not polite to call people stupid, but she's stupid. That's a problem. Also, and maybe this matters more to me because I was born and raised in Detroit, she advocated the Detroit charter school system, which even charter advocates acknowledge is the biggest school reform disaster in the country, at least according to the New York Times. Again, not a huge thing, but keep in mind, this is her list of qualifications. Right? She's not an educator. She doesn't know anything about this, right? This is the stuff that she had done leading up to being Secretary of Education. What's she done so far since taking that mantle? Well, she's rolled back regulations on campus sexual assault. Finally! Remember in 2016, we were all going to the polls and we were all saying, boy, I sure hope we can finally get somebody in there that makes it harder for rapists to get justice. Well, that's what we got. Betsy DeVos, one of her first acts as Secretary of Education. Wasn't her first. By the way, this is also her. She said 90% of sexual assault complaints fall into the category of, we were both drunk. No, it's okay. She apologized for saying it later, so she made it okay. Now, this actually was her first act as Secretary of Education. Rescinded guidelines that protected transgender students. Remember, we were going to let kids go to the bathroom that matched them? Not so much anymore, thanks to Betsy. Betsy also scaled back investigations into civil rights violations in public schools and universities. Can anyone think of a non-evil reason to do that? Right, I'm a pretty creative guy. The only ones I'm coming up with involve like aliens that only Betsy knows about with Earth-destroying rays and whatnot. Wait, there's more. She blocked protections for students attending BS colleges, obviously like, the one her boss had. And I'm not the only one taking issues, especially with the lack of civil rights investigations. She's also been sued by 17 state attorneys general, also the one in D.C., for the exact same thing, right? So that's a pretty serious problem. A more serious problem is her goal is to Christianize American education, and her boss is on board. Sure, you know this one. Now, of course, this is the president's budget. President's budget is DOA. It's just a list of priorities and whatnot. But this is in the list of priorities, and that should terrify the hell out of you. Because we're going to be counting on the people who graduate from these schools to do our surgery, many of us. Or we're going to go to Canada. Which, honestly, as bad as the snow is where I live, I might as well be in Canada. But okay, so those are my first 7 steps. A lot of you are thinking to yourselves, hey, man, I drove all this way. You said 8 easy steps, 7 of them, a lot of them are very hard. So I brought up an alternative step to make myself honest. Step 8, or just step 1 on a whole new list here, don't live in a fucking theocracy. Right? Now, largely, I'm going to tell you, go see Jim on this one. Because I have the same message, the same overall message that he has. Now, I don't want to brag, but right before the 2016 election, my wife and I moved to a swing state just so our vote would count. Well, not just so our vote would count, but we were trying to pick between New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania, and we're like, hey, one of them is a swing state. Let's move there. Didn't help, apparently. So obviously, we need to get politically active. We need to vote. Now, I was going to say a whole bunch of stuff about community organizing, the importance of doing it on a community level. I think Jim beat me to it and said it way better than I could. So by all means, see him, talk to him. That's what we need, right? We need the local level activism. We're not going to win this thing only fighting the fights in D.C. We need to fight the fights in town hall as well. Another thing that we need to do, obviously, I'm not going to solve all these problems here, but I'm going to at least throw my 2 cents in. Another thing we need to do is go on the offense, right? Because here's how it works now, right? We just stand here with a giant mallet right in the middle of the country, Kansas somewhere, and North Carolina will stand up and they'll go, our state book's the Bible. And we'll go, no, it isn't. Boom. And then right when we run over there, like Wisconsin will say, Muslims can't go to our schools. And we're like, yes, they can. Boom. And then Oklahomophobia will say, gay people aren't allowed to use water fountains. And we'll go over there. Boom. And that's what we're doing, right? We're whacking one mole after the other. We need to give them some moles to whack along the way. Now, that's not easy to do because it requires getting a bunch of atheists facing in the same direction. Yeah. This is my job, by the way. And the thing about atheists is we're all too smart for our own good very often. Somebody has an idea and we're like, yeah, that'll never work. We should have our focus here. We should put our focus here. That sends the wrong message, blah, blah, blah. I'm not like that. Basically, if anybody says, here's my idea, I'm just like breaking out the pom-poms and I'm like, yeah, go for it, man. I may not... Now, I want to be super clear on what I'm saying here because obviously anybody can grab the mantle of atheist or the mantle of humanist and be a completely terrible person. And there's a lot of very terrible people that want to say they're part of the atheist movement. I'm not asking you to work with those people. We should draw a very clear line on misogynists and rape apologists and rapists and racists and all of this other stuff. But... what I'm talking about is when somebody says like, oh, that bench is ugly. I don't support that. Oh, in God we trust on the money. That's no big deal. Like, I support all of that stuff. Now, obviously, I put my money and my efforts where I think they're going to do the most good, but I am vocal about my support for all the other efforts as well. I think that's something really important, and it's something that we lack a bit in the atheist community. Obviously, we could go on a long time with different advice, but I've gone a little while already. I did want to say, though, I recognize many people don't have the freedom to even come out as atheist. I recognize that not everybody has the time to devote to secular causes or the money to invest in these type of things. So if you don't have the time, if you don't have the ability, all I ask is you support those of us who do. How'd that get in there? And remember, of course, when you support the Scathing Atheist on Patreon, it's not just me you're supporting. He's in a little blankie. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. I really appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noah. You can keep talking for as long as you want because it's going to be about a good half hour at least until the food gets here. But
all right, okay.
We normally do have Q&A. Yeah, that's why I have it in my hand. I heard the basket didn't make it all the way around, so I'm going to start that again now at this point. And so we have plenty of time for Q&A and conversation. And all I ask is that you use the mic so that we can capture it on the audio. When you use it, tilt it back towards you. If you think a conversation will ensue, don't hand it back to me because every month someone hands it back to me and then there's a back and forth and then we lose it on the audio. So if you're just going to ask your question and you're done with it, hand it back to me. Otherwise, hang on to it. But does anybody have questions for Noah?
Yeah, how close are we to the...
I just said use the mic.
How close are we to Secret Lair, Pennsylvania?
Well, normally about an hour and 17 minutes, according to Google. This morning, about 2 hours and 40. So, yeah, it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. Yeah, so no, if anybody has any questions about anything that we talked about here, or if they just have general questions about podcasting or where I live, yeah, let's get you out. We're going to get you the microphone here real quick.
I just wanted to say I sent an email to our daughter telling her about this meeting and the lunch, and I left out a very critical comma, and she interpreted the topic as surviving a theocracy with pizza and salad. And she said she was in favor of that.
All right. I'll work that into the next talk. I believe you had a question as well? Yeah, here, we'll get microphone in.
So what I'm kind of curious about is with, you'd mentioned people who have trouble coming out in their jobs. I'm one of those people. I'm head of HR for a hospital, which is worrying about being taken over by a religious one. And so what are your thoughts on how to sort of be a little bit subversive, but still kind of keep your income, I guess?
Yeah, right. No, I totally get the question. I should point out I'm not really good at subversive. I have it right. I lay it right on my shoulders there. But look, I think there are a lot of great resources, and I think that there's a lot of good individual relationships that you can that you can cultivate and create, and obviously there will be people. What I found in the past is that I wouldn't you don't just come out and say, hey, I'm the atheist in the break room, by the way. But once you make a few personal relationships and make that clear to the people that you work with, they tend to spread that around. That tends to kind of work its way around the rumor mill, and I find that's super useful. Now, as far as specifically as far as the pending takeover of a Catholic hospital, I know I'll tell you what, if you give me your email, I know there's a group that's working. I can't remember the reference right now, but I know there's a group that's working to try to actually help hospitals resist being taken over by Catholic health groups. And I can possibly send you some information on that as well.
All right. Anybody else? Question for our speaker today? All right.
Sorry, I should have. This took 60 minutes when I did it at home, but then I started talking at diatribe speed. I apologize. Yeah, right.
I've been listening to your podcast for a few years, and I appreciate your known to internet there. I didn't realize at first the gag, so I want to congratulate you on that part. But the only time I know anonymity in your position is very powerful. In fact, the only time I've ever known, or that I can recall, that you ever voluntarily gave that up was, I believe, a podcast you did right after the Charlie Hebdo incident. And I was wondering, I was kind of curious, what inspired you to? I mean, obviously, I can guess what I can figure what inspired you, but what was the moment that really just like made you say, I got to do this, or to hell with it? And did you get any kickback or response from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a bit of a Mandela effect that goes on with that. With listeners to our show, because everybody seems to remember that having happened during right after the Charlie Hebdo thing, and it did. It was like 7 or 8 weeks after that, and it had been weighing on me for a while. Now I should say that the reason I originally chose a pen name when I started doing this was that I worked for a toy company. The toy company did a lot of business with, we did a lot of bar mitzvahs, we did a lot of work with Catholic schools and Jewish schools, and so having my name associated, and I was a very public face of this company, so having my name associated with that was something that would cost me my job. So that's why I went with the No Illusions name to begin with, but then they fired me anyway. And so I didn't need it anymore. By then, I was already Noah, and everybody knew me as Noah, so I couldn't go to my real name. But so for a while, I hadn't been protecting it for any particular reason. But I did sort of feel like I had it in my back pocket, right? Like this is something that I can do to add emphasis in the future. And I believe it was about 7 weeks after the Charlie Hebdo massacre, there was yet another atheist that was killed in Pakistan, or no, it wasn't in Bangladesh. It was another machete attack, another particularly gruesome attack, fatal attack against an atheist blogger. And I just was overwhelmed with guilt in that moment that, here I am in the U.S., and I don't even have a job to worry about in this, because I do this for a living. So I'm protecting my name for no reason at all, and these people who are risking their lives are putting their real names out there. So it was more or less, it was just a guilty feeling. And I knew, like I said, at the same time, I knew that I could add some impact to that situation. And I just felt like if there's anything I can do to get people to take this a little more seriously, I owe it to my, my brothers and sisters in arms in less forgiving parts of the world to do so. Thanks for the question.
And also, is Eli really as crazy as he sounds on the podcast, or is that a gimmick?
I'm sorry, is he really as what?
As crazy as he...
Oh, yes. Oh, crazy, yes. Absolutely. No, the thing is, the reason that Eli's able to get away with being the character that he is on the show is because he's the nicest guy in the world in person. And if you ever meet him, it's so obvious he doesn't mean any of the cruel and evil things that he says. But he is that crazy. He is that nutty. Now, Eli's crazy is a much more subversive and frightening type of mental illness, but he is... He is that crazy. Any other questions?
All right, I see a hand from Sharon here.
Hi. So given that, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree with me, I think the main roadblock to religious people giving up their religion, I think the only reason that makes sense to me why they cling to it is because I think it's just too frightening to face. I think most people kind of live in denial because just to face the reality that there's no God is very frightening, that there's no afterlife, there's no divine balancing force that's going to take care of the bad things that happen in the world. And given that, when you want to get people over to your side, it's not so smart to be like, hey, asshole, you're wrong and I'm right. Have you found anything that works to talk to people who are religious to try and get them to rethink at least, or to kind of take a step over towards your side?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, this is like the subtlety thing he was asking me about earlier. I'm not the best in the world at that kind of stuff. But again, I think obviously if you can be vocal about your atheism or about your beliefs, about your humanism, I think that's a great thing. I think honestly, humanism is sort of an underused tool for us, not only because the word doesn't have the quite the terrifying connotations, humanist. If you put secular in front of it, then they freak out. But just humanist doesn't sound that bad. And so I find that when I'm talking to people about humanism, I can get them agreeing and nodding along for quite a while until they realize, oh, holy shit, this is atheism, right? And not to say that you necessarily have to be an atheist to be a humanist, but I find that that's a great like sort of a way to sneak it in on them. But I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head that it is a fear-based thing, right? I think specifically it's fear of the lack of an afterlife. I think that's the thing that holds most people to it. And so I think that, sort of the point that you're making, that we need to take that seriously, right? Because people are not going to give up a fear because it's been dismissed, right? That's sort of the argument we have to make. I'm actually really excited about the movie you guys are showing. I'm still going to be right here in the PA area. I might have to make it out for that. Because I do think that that's the biggest question that we have to overcome. Now, me personally, I mean, I don't know. I'm young and I'm relatively healthy, so maybe I'm not thinking I'm relatively young and not less relatively healthy, but so maybe I'm not thinking about it as much as a lot of other people. I don't particularly have an issue with it. I'm kind of looking forward to the peace and quiet, like I believe was it Mark Twain who said, I was not alive for a long time before I was born and it didn't bother me. But then obviously, of course, there's also, it's not just your own mortality that terrifies you. It's the mortality of your family. It's the mortality of your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your kids. And all those things. I don't think atheism has a good answer to that yet. I think that's the biggest question that we need to find an answer to. Actually, I've been exploring that quite a bit. I would say I'm researching a book about that, but then people would assume that eventually that book was going to come out, and I'm making no guarantees, but I have been looking into that quite a bit. So if nothing else, maybe I'll have a more involved answer for you in a future diatribe.
I'm going to interrupt our Q&A for just 1 minute. There's a student here from, is it Westchester University, that would like to address the group.
Hello there, everybody. Brief intermission, okay? My name is Warren G. Harding, no relation. I'm a graduate student at Westchester University trying to get my master's degree in psychology. And at the moment, I am working on my graduate thesis right now, and I'm collecting data right now. And the study is on trying to assess people's life satisfaction and correlations with their attitudes towards fairness and justice. So if you want to help a brother out, get his master's degree and walk this May, you can, come towards me and I can give you a survey. It shouldn't take you like 5 to 10 minutes or so to get done, especially it helps kill time while you're waiting for the food and everything. So yeah, just come to me, get the survey, I'll walk you through it. And if you have any sort of questions, you can just come to me and talk to me about it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I did see other hands for Noah. Question back here.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Surviving. I had a quick question. It's a little bit of a two-parter. I'm not sure if maybe you're the right podcaster to ask about this, considering some of the comments you've made recently. But like as an atheist, I've come out to a lot of friends and family, and what I found is a sort of a difficulty maintaining the necessary conversations that need to keep going between myself and people who I share space with, especially in terms of religiosity and such. And I was wondering if you had any input in terms of keeping those things going in a civil manner, because if we're going to impart any change in our environment, we have to work together with the folks that we live with and the folks that we share space with, whether it's on a political level or just even in our households. The second part to that was, do you have any more podcasts coming out? I was just,
Yeah, we don't have a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday. Yeah.
How much time do you have?
Yeah, right. No, Thomas Smith's ahead of us by one now. We're going to have to throw out one more. No, so I think that's actually a great question. So I should be clear that like my on-podcast persona is one thing because I know on the podcast that I'm talking to atheists, right? And that the whole point of the podcast is to inspire atheists to come to things like this, to get more politically active, and just to remind them that, you might be in the middle of the Bible Belt, but you're not alone in the world. There are other people there for you. Whereas, so my attitude during the, on the podcast is very rah-rah and go fuck yourself. But in my personal life, obviously that doesn't work. Like you say, you've got to keep things civil. What I find there's two types of relationships when it comes to having that conflict, right? That atheist-religious conflict, or like I said, the political conflict that very often accompanies it. One is the necessary relationship, right? The one like with your spouse, the one with your parents, the one with people that you absolutely have to see constantly. The other is that more peripheral relationship, and I think that one of the problems that a lot of atheists, especially when they're new to atheist activism, get into, is that they feel like they take on this huge mantle, and then they do the job, and then they keep doing the job, right? What I've found is that very often you can have one conversation, like with a coworker, right, where you explain what you believe, and you've planted enough of a seed that it's going to grow, that concept is going to grow at its own pace from there, and there's really nothing that you can say to help it along at that point. There's a lot of things that you can say to screw it up. Right, so I find very often what I'll do is, I'll try to find a comfortable way to have the sort of the initial conversation. A lot of times when people find out that you're an atheist, they just come to you and they're curious about it. And they want to know, what do you think happens? What do you believe? How do you get by? How do you get through, etc. And I think very often that one conversation is really all you need. But as an atheist, of course, in the moment, it's very rare for somebody to say, "Hey, I changed my mind. You're right. There's no God. What was I thinking?" Right? So far more often, you give them some good things to think about. You try not to overload them. Maybe they come back to you. Maybe they come back with a refutation of some sort or something like that. Very often they do. But I feel like, again, I'm certainly no expert in civility. But I think that the key, at least as far as I've found, is not to give them any more than they ask for. Right now, obviously, sometimes you want to be a little bit more proactive, and you want to make sure that people understand. Like, if you're at you work for a small company, and everybody there is religious except for you, and they say, "Hey, let's all join in a prayer," right? You want to say something right then and there. But I find that very often trying to say the fewest possible words is the best answer. Isn't it amazing that I gave such a rambling answer that ended with "try to use as few words as you can"? But yeah, that would be my advice. Question up front. Well, you're quite welcome, and you're quite welcome. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. That was outstanding. In a professional setting, I've had to try to change people's minds, and the technique that I use is to reach out to them and ask them to explain why they hold the position that they do. Sometimes, in the course of explaining themselves, they come to realize that they didn't really think about what they were saying. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's great. Yeah. Very often the dialectic is all it takes. The only thing I'd caution you about that is that it does put you on the defensive right away. So it makes it a little bit more, depending on what your goals are, depending on what your immediate goals are, obviously. Oh, here, they want to make sure it's on.
It's showing interest in the other person. That you're not just explaining something to them, you're trying to understand where they're coming from. And so all I can say is I have seen it work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely agree. I definitely agree that, very often all it takes for somebody all it takes to plant that seed is for them to have that question, right? And it's definitely more powerful if they're asking themselves that question. So yeah, much appreciated. We have any other questions other than when the hell is the pizza showing up? Oh.
Okay. Any recommendations for someone who is not an out atheist, but obviously black, female, atheist, and interested in going into the political realm? Because I'm thinking of putting my name in the hat this year, but
Oh, awesome. Wait, I thought so. Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. I would not be the right person to talk to on that. That was the first thing I thought when they asked me to do this talk. I was like, wow, I'm not really an expert on anything, and I'm really proving that during the Q&A. No, I don't know anything about civility. I don't know anything about politics. But I know that there's a number of atheist organizations working right now to try to help atheists get on the ballot, try to help atheists who have never run for office before. I should have some references for that. I'm kind of looking around, seeing if anybody else is holding up their phone.
I can't remember what her partner's name is. A woman named Sarah Blaine. Yeah. And if you Google SERAHBLAIN, you probably get pointed in her direction, and she's involved in that kind of stuff.
She's the head of the Secular Coalition in Arizona.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah, Secular Coalition for America is a great place to start. At the very least, they can point you to a lot of great resources. Are you local?
Yes, I'm actually Phillipsburg, so it would be either Jersey, or it would be Jersey, either local, but I'm thinking going higher. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be able to do as much as possible with what little time we have left before.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, best of luck to you. That's absolutely what we need. And look, Jim made a really good point earlier. We have the same numbers as the evangelicals. Right, and that's why I talk so much. I always try to end anything that I do like this, any public thing that I do, by reminding everyone the importance and the power of unity. Even if we're not speaking with a united voice, at least if we can get behind everyone else who's speaking on our behalf, that makes such a huge difference. It's a constant frustration, I think. In the atheist community, that we do wield so little political power, despite the fact that not only do we have there are more atheists and humanists in this country than there are people in the LGBT community, than there are Jewish people in America, than there are Muslims in America, and yet we wield so little political power. Not only that, but we generally are drawn from the wealthier ranks of Americans, right? Generally speaking, demographically, we tend to be a little bit better off. So we do have the money, we do have the means to invest in this, and very often it's just that lack of unity. Of course, a lot of that comes from the fact that we generally got here by rejecting things, right? Not by accepting atheism, but by rejecting the other thing. And I think that sort of permeates. It's just sort of a selection bias that we get there. But yeah, in short, I would definitely recommend you talk to Secular Coalition for America. And I'd like to say, too, I know that we have a lot of listeners that are interested in doing the same thing. So as you're going through the process, feel free to email me, noillusions@yahoo.com. And I'd love to have you on the show and talk to you about what that process is like. Because I think, I had Aaron Ron a little while back. He was doing the same thing. He was running for local office in Texas. And I thought a lot of listeners reached back out to me immediately after that and said, never thought of that. I could do that. I might not be able to be a senator. I might not be able to be a congressman, but I can sure as hell run for local office.
Yeah.
Best of luck to you. We're going to need you.
Thank you.
All right. Question up here?
Hi. It seems like lately there's kind of a split in the atheist community, and that your side, your group is more social justice conscious or friendly. So, what do you think it is about your style of, atheism that is more social justice conscious? And do you think there's something intrinsic in atheism that? How important do you think social justice is to atheism in general, I guess? Yeah,
that is sort of the big question. I mean, I just want to push back a little bit on the phrasing that you used there. This is an entirely semantic thing, no problem with the question. But a lot of people talk about the split in the atheist community. I think, honestly, what we're seeing is the growth of the atheist community, right? So it's less of a schism and more of a we're bringing on more and more people. So obviously, there are going to be more and more disparate voices. I mean, honestly, I could go back to the target slide. I think even just out of pure self-interest, we should be worried about social justice issues, right? Just because we're going to get caught up in the net that they're sweeping up everyone that they want to go after. But the honest truth is that, for me, I am atheist by way of social justice, right? That's what inspired me. I don't understand, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm a pedant, but if it's not about social justice, I don't know what it's about for you, right? I mean, I get having, an intellectual debate, and I get that's a fun thing to do, but it's academic, right? If we're going to go out in the world and do it, I think the social justice is an intrinsic part of it. Again, I've told this story on the show before, but I decided to get involved in atheist activism because I was on the subway in New York City and I saw a Hasidic Jewish father berating his daughter for reading a book because she's not supposed to read books because she's a girl. Now that's what got me involved. I looked at that and I saw the misogyny, but I saw the religion as sort of the root of it. Maybe I misidentified it, maybe I didn't, but I thought that's something I can attack right there, right? So if you tell me, you just have to talk about atheism and it can't be about social justice, well then I'm going to go talk about what makes me passionate and what I care about.
Yeah. I guess maybe some people are drawn into it more for just the logic, or the science.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know the truth and not superstition.
Right.
But,
yeah, like I said, I get that. I absolutely get that. Like I said, it's
social justice, I think, too. If you're worried about the truth and logic, it serves social justice too when you follow it through correctly. So.
Absolutely. Now, the thing is, the one distinction I want to draw there is if the science ever moves against social justice, I will stay on social justice. Right?
Okay.
And what I mean is if the science ever comes out and says, oh, hey, look, here is a good scientific reason for misogyny, I'm not going to become a misogynist because of that.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think there's a very important intellectual end of it. I think in a lot of ways that argument is played out. We had a lot of really good books immediately after 9/11 that really explored and laid down all of the logical arguments. As to my knowledge, there are no new arguments from the theists, right? So, part of it obviously is that it's what I'm passionate about. But part of it too is that I got to come up with new shit to talk about every week. I can't. The Christians haven't come up with a new argument since 1872 or something. So I don't know. Gorka had the argument from Trump that we talked about on the show the other day, but with that exception, I don't necessarily. Now I recognize that you can be very active and involved in atheist issues because you're really worried about the separation of church and state, right? That you're very worried about this one issue, and maybe you don't agree with everybody on all these other issues, and that's fine, right? That's I will march alongside you for the issues we agree with, but in terms of let's keep in mind that if you did divide up into two camps, say like the SJW and the anti-SJW camp, obviously nobody would want to use either of those terms in either of those groups, obviously. But if you really divided that up, I think that like I said, the former group or the anti-SJW group would sure run out of activism to get involved with pretty quickly. And like I say, I think that the concern that a lot of those people have is that it's diluting the movement or that it's distracting people from more important things. Like I said, I'm a cheerleader. I'm rah-rah about everything. Where I donate my personal time and effort is different than what I support, publicly. But yeah, I also think, just when it comes right down to it, social justice is a good idea.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to come over here and work my way to the right.
So in the talk you mentioned that kind of your job is to herd cats.
Mm-hmm.
What's the trick there? How do you keep people from bike shedding like crazy like that?
Mostly I do it by staying in a room by myself and then putting it out into the world. But the honest truth is that I don't. Right. Okay. So a lot of people, whenever there's a controversy in the atheist movement, whenever anybody says something stupid or turns out to have been sexually harassing people at conferences for the last 10 years or whatever, people will reach out to me and say, are you going to address this on your show? Right? And my answer is almost always no. Now, a lot of people have accused me of cowardice for that because they say, well, you're just afraid to piss off these people about these issues. Well, the honest truth is the reason I don't do it is I don't see the point. I think everybody who listens to our show knows that I'm anti-rape, right? So do I have to come out and say that? I don't think that I do. Now, obviously, there are like if somebody who is a regular guest on my show or something like that was something very negative came out about them, then I would address that directly. But the way I feel, the way I figure, and what's been successful for me is that I don't, unless it's one of the idiots I had pictures of before, right? One of the people that we all agree is insane, one of the Pat Robertsons or David Mannings. I don't generally address the person. I address the argument, and I know that that's an ideal that a lot of people try to get to, but like I literally don't even tell you who the argument is from, right? Like there was the big Nazi punching thing that went around, and obviously there were specific people I was pushing back. I did a diatribe all about how bad an idea I think that is, how bad an idea I think it is to advocate violence, and there were very specific people I was talking to. Eli was one of them, but I didn't mention their names because, again, first of all, my argument stands on its own. If you're familiar with the person saying the opposite, then you know who I'm talking about. If you're not, I don't want to bring attention to somebody who's advocating violence in the first place. And also, if you're a fan of the person that disagrees with me, I haven't asked you to divide up your loyalties at all, right? I haven't asked you, I can't like this guy and Noah, right? Because look, there are, for example, Matt Dillahunty and I have talked a number of times of name dropping like hell on Matt Dillahunty there. He also took me to dinner one time. It was awesome. No, but and a cabaret show. Yeah, right. But Matt Dillahunty and I have had some vehement disagreements about whether or not atheists should use the term agnostic atheist or describe themselves as agnostic atheists. And he's talked about it on Atheist Experience and in shows. I've talked about it on my show. We've had some counterpoint stuff on it. I've never mentioned I disagree. I've never come on the show and say, Matt Dillahunty is wrong about this, here's why, right? I present my argument because I don't want to try to, and I use Matt because this is, this is such an academic issue and Matt is such a beloved guy that obviously everybody knows that I have, no serious issues with Matt. That's why I'm using him as an example. But by skipping over the actual name and just dealing with the argument, I think that you take out some of the natural divisions that show up in the atheist community. And I also think, look, it's all about consistency, right? If you're coming at people with a consistent message over and over again, the people who don't like that message are going to go away. The people who do like it are going to stay. So as long as you stay consistent in your messaging and in the style of your messaging, it's easy to get a lot of voices, or a lot of ears rather. And that's my goal, right? More than anything else, is to, obviously for financial reasons, but also just in terms of effectiveness, is to have as many ears as possible, in this community, to be able to reach out to as many people as I can. And if some of those people disagree with me about like sort of these, whatever the social justice issues or all these different things, I want to provide a podcast for them as well. I want a place where they're not going to be constantly harangued and feel like they're constantly being asked to set aside their own opinions, their own beliefs, etc. Because I do think that that's more unifying, and I think that you can achieve that without ever shying away from your positions, from your opinions as well.
Thank you.
Hope that answers your question. Oh, yeah, we got this guy right over here.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you and Heath and Eli for using your humor and your wit to put a smile on my face in the age of Trump. Thank you. And
thank you.
And for the times that I've already listened to the podcast for the week and I'm sensing the doom around me, I don't have a cat, and my girlfriend was thinking about getting a pug. Do you think pugs are unethical?
It's a great question. I'm not going to name any names like I just said in my last one, but yes, I think pugs are very unethical. I think that's a terrible, terrible thing to do to a dog. I mean, it's already been done. They're already there and everything, but yeah, like when if it's between a dog that's been intentionally bred to have sinus problems or a rescue dog, I mean, yeah, I would go rescue dog. Eli would vehemently disagree. Oh, I'm breaking my own rule here. Eli would obviously vehemently disagree with me on that one. But yeah, I got to say, I've just on a personal note, again, I've shared this on the show, so I apologize. But my wife on election day, she made red, white, and blue cupcakes. We were so happy. We were gonna have a lady president. I had a diatribe all written. I was so excited. We were gonna have a lady president, and it was gonna be awesome. And then we're sitting there, and I'm pretty okay with math. So way before the networks were calling it, I'm like, oh my God, there's no way for him to lose now, right? There's no way this is going to Clinton now. And so I just sat there slack-jawed. I'm still sitting there slack-jawed in a lot of ways, right? I think we all are. But then after about 45 minutes, an hour of soaking that in, it started to occur to me that, oh my God, the whole show's written. This is Tuesday night. We write our show, we record on Wednesday morning. So I'm like, oh my God, the whole show's written. We're probably going to have to address this. we're probably going to have to. And then it occurred to me that, oh my God, I've got to write a diatribe for all of these people that were sitting here just like myself tonight going, holy crap, what the hell happened here? I have to try to vocalize that fear and that pain. And man, I'll tell you what, it's never felt more like work than it felt that night. I'll say that for sure. But you're quite welcome. Hopefully we won't have to entertain you in the Trump era for much longer. Yeah, actually, the cupcakes just ended up sitting there. We couldn't bring ourselves to eat them. They just sat there, and we eventually threw them away. I should have taken a time-lapse photography of them or something like that. Yeah. So do you have a question as well?
Yeah. So the first one's a comment first. Screw New York pizza. Now we can get to the real question. So,
I'm sorry. Would you say Boston pizza is better than Boston?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay.
It's terrible too. So as one of your recently elected listeners, I'm curious. Where do you envision? I'm local level everything. So where do you envision us in this scheme of things? I know how senators and congressmen and all that fit into the scheme of things, but where do you envision us local people?
What can you do to? Yeah, I got you. The first thing you can do is talk to Jim before you leave, because I really do think that those are the efforts, right? The reason why we can't get a whole hell of a lot done, again, it's because we're not well organized, right? The reason why evangelicals, despite having much smaller numbers than us, can actually have their own president is because we're not very well organized. So I think that the most important thing that you can do is to join your local groups, and when they have things like this, because the advantage that what they're doing here gives you, it's not just that you have you have a direction, you have support, et cetera, but you can get a bunch of people pushing at the same issues. Like Jim said, we need to pick 2 or 3 issues that are the issues that we're going to fight for. And if we're all on the same page about those things, it makes a much bigger difference, right? You see that in all of the effective lobbying that happens. You see the anti-gun lobbying that's going on right now. It seems to be very focused on raising the age to 21, universal background checks, and banning the large capacity magazines. And I think as long as everybody stays on that message, they can be very effective. But of course, just like any other issue, there are 5,000 other issues that you could tack onto that. And if everybody's going their own way and everybody wants everything right away, then you end up with Occupy Wall Street and nothing gets done, right? So I think it is really important that we organize together, that we're not a bunch of lone wolves out there, that we're agreeing. And sometimes that means, by the way, taking the thing that you're most passionate about and putting it in your back pocket for a while. And I know that's damn hard to do, right? I got into atheist activism because of the sexism of religion. So if somebody asked me, well, you're going to have to tone down on that for a little while and focus in on this other thing, that's very difficult for me to do. But it's the only way that we can work as a whole, and the only way that obviously that we can succeed is to work as a whole.
Thanks.
Hope that helped. Yeah, also vote. Oh, yeah, just hand it forward here. Yes, sir.
Oh, obviously, great talk.
Thank you.
I was wondering, because I know I have my cutoff point, because I don't mind reaching out to religious people and talking to religious people. It's just there's a line where you go across it, and I'm just like, and we're done talking now. And I know mine, but I was just wondering, what's yours?
Mine is honestly, Tracy Harris put this way better than I could, I think. Mine is when it's clear that we're not capable of going anywhere. Right? As soon as this is how it usually goes. I can only speak for myself, obviously, but the way it usually goes for me is, whatever. You don't believe in Jesus? Okay, and we start the conversation, right? And they say, well, what about X? And I'm like, okay, here's Y and Z. Here's my counter to X. And they're like, all right, well, what about B? And I'm like, no, we're talking about X. Have you conceded X yet? Have you changed your opinion on X? Because I'm not moving on to Y until we acknowledge that. If that's the case, if you're withdrawing that part of your argument, then fine, right? But when it becomes clear to me that that we're not engaged anymore in an intellectually honest discussion, that we're not, there's no possibility of it going. And now, obviously, that's where everybody's line, right, is where they don't think it can go any further. But for me, that's always when it becomes intellectually disingenuous.
I think that applies to any dogmatic group of people, be it evangelicals, Trumpers, and whatever. Like they'll say something completely outlandish. You counter it with facts, and you show them a link to the facts, and then they just move on to something else.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing, too, is that we're trained by social media to have really divisive conversations or to expect very divisive conversations. Very often when you have a conversation with somebody in person, it's nowhere near as divisive as you thought it was going to be because you've had that same conversation online. And online, people have, as they say, internet balls, and they... and then they get really rough and tough and talk a lot of smack that they would never do when you're talking face to face to people. So I think in a lot of ways, social media is like exacerbating the problems we have in these conversations. Like you said, you're immediately going to, and then you send them a link, and I'm like, yeah, right. When you're sending links, you're in a very bad medium to have that conversation to begin with. Not that I don't think that it's important, but the social media conversations are much harder to make headway on, I think, than the in-person ones.
And my final question is basically the same one that basically ended my Southern Baptist part of my life, is when's lunch?
Hello. You were talking about social media not being the best medium for debates. How is it for reaching the wider audience as opposed to the person you're talking with?
No, that's a great point. Obviously, the difference between social media and a conversation here, I'll take it from you. Obviously, the difference between social media and a conversation that you're having with an individual, the conversation you're having with the individual is just the two of you, whereas the debate lingers on and can be seen by other people. And I think it is very important. Like I said, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from talking on social media, but the point that you're making, I think, is a very important one. That is, even if you don't change anybody's mind, the conversation can still have value if it's on social media. I know a lot of people, like Heath, we always make jokes about how Heath's never on Twitter, never on Facebook. He actually goes on there all the time. He just doesn't say anything. He just doesn't comment. He's lurking in the shadows. He's right behind you now. But there are a lot of people like that, right, that don't want to get involved in the debate. They don't want to have the 100 private messages and stuff, and they very much appreciate you standing in in their stead, right? I can't tell you how many times I've gone to I've seen a post and I thought, oh, here's why this is wrong. I gotta say something about that. And then I look and someone else has already beaten me to it. They've done a much better job with their resources and everything. And I'm like, oh, good. There's 15 minutes of my day that you just saved. So like I said, I think there's a ton of value in it. Like I don't want anyone to take away that I think that social media discussions about atheism and about religion aren't important. I think they're vital. I just don't think that we should expect to change a bunch of minds and see people like, giving a public mea culpa at the end of that thread. Yes, sir.
So, podcast that introduced me to you, God Awful Movies. Some of those movies I've watched along with you. Some I've just let you take the pain. Can you think of one moment, either recently or since you started the show, where you felt just sort of exploded at disbelief at what you were witnessing?
Boy, I could.
Or video.
There's a lot of answers to that question. Wow, like one particular. Okay, well, you know what though? Okay, I'll just give you the most recent one. On the episode that'll be coming out on Tuesday, we watched a movie called movie. It was a TV show called Salty the Songbook. Do we have any former Christians that are familiar with Salty the Songbook? Okay, right on. A couple of you. Oh my God, is that insane? And like the way I described it on the show is like the only way I could describe it was like we were all on acid and flipping through channels together, and we landed there and couldn't change the channel, but we really wanted to. But what really amazes me, I think more than anything, is how often the Christians are the bad guys in their movies. Right? Like we're watching these movies and going like, you could have been a good guy. You're writing this whole thing. You know, like, so, and I guess a lot of this is the cues and the keys that religious people know, right? Like you know, you talk to a Baptist and they know immediately what you're talking about when you're like, it's not by works, it's by faith. But if you're not familiar with that doctrine, and then it's just somebody bitching about doing good things, right? You're just like, well, you can't get to heaven like that. It's like, well, if you're going to lie anyway, this seems like a good lie. But that's what always freaks me out about it, is just how often it's just like, okay, so they know they're the bad guys. Wow. Not even pretending otherwise. Now, I believe I just saw a whole bunch of pizzas walking through this way. Do we have any other questions? If we did, you'll probably want to make it quick, because I think we got some hungry folks here.
And Brian, do you want to make a plug for Atheists Fight Hunger? Sure. All right.
So, for those of you who have been to the Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Conference, we've done a fundraiser called Atheists Fight Hunger, where for every 25 cents you donate, we feed one meal to one person. In 2015, we raised we raised enough money for 30,300 meals. At the 2017 conference in October, we raised about enough for about 25,000 meals. And over Easter weekend, we'll be working with American Atheists in Oklahoma City, and they will be doing the exact same thing there. We're going to be having a meal packing event there in Oklahoma City. And I'm really excited to be working with a national organization to do this event. It's going to be amazing. And then they're having, for those who come to help pack food, there's going to be an after party on Sunday. But if you go to the convention website on atheist.org, you can donate money to help feed hungry people directly in the Oklahoma City area. So please, if you can, help out with that. If you're going, help us pack meals. That's going to be amazing.
Just one more round of applause for Noah. Thank you so much for coming. And